If you want to let go of past pain, transcend your traumas, expand your consciousness, and reclaim your power to finally be the main character of your own conscious reality, as well as learning about conscious living, you're at the right place. Welcome to Conscious Matters. It's a safe space where we chat about conscious matters, focus on self-empowerment, awareness, holistic wellness, and sustainability. Join me, Melissa DiVieri, for inspiring conversations with myself and some of the most beautiful souls out there. We expand on our experiences and share what we've learned along our healing journey to live in peace, harmony, and mindfulness on a daily basis. Oh, and share with loved ones, and don't forget to take 5 little seconds to review this podcast by just leaving a few stars and kind words. That would really help with the algorithm, so we can spread the message to help more people live consciously. Get your mind, body, and soul ready for a ride in consciousness. Namaste, listeners. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. That's pretty much self-explanatory. So we're back into talking a little bit about depression, but from a light angle. Don't worry. I've been a little bit vocal about my own depression and how it actually brought me to awareness and this conscious living lifestyle. Finally realizing that there is more to life than to live it for others, for a status, for a conforming to someone's ideal of what we're supposed to live on earth, for fulfilling a company's ideal that is not yours. My depression helped me to connect to my soul, remembering who I am and why I'm here, discovering healing modalities, taking responsibility for my own life, healing my traumas and let go of past experiences, and ultimately connecting more to God, source, the creator of the universe, to divine love like ever before, finding light in darkness to overcome depression. It's a journey though, with setbacks from time to time. But for me, going through that made me see very clearly that the foundation that I created in the past was not a solid one. And my foundation needed to first crumble, which led to going through depression, to realize that it was a weak one, doing the inner work to transcend that state and build up a new foundation that is much more stronger and stable, so I can keep on building on it in a more aligned, secure, and fulfilling way. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than usual because I've been contacted by New York Times bestselling author Jonathan Robinson, publisher, to discuss his latest book, The Enlightenment Project: How I Went from Depressed to Blessed, and You Can Too, where he shares stories of what he learned from his encounters with spiritual leaders of this world, as well as what he learned by practicing over 50 spiritual methods and philosophies that really work to overcome his own depression and providing him with lasting inner peace. Jonathan has made a career out of getting to know the greatest spiritual leaders of our time by spending decades interviewing over 100 well-known spiritual teachers to get their take on how to live a happy, peaceful, and meaningful life, including the Dalai Lama, Byron Katie, Oprah, Deepak Chopra, the late Mother Teresa, and Ram Dass. Jonathan is a one-of-a-kind psychotherapist, best-selling author of 14 books, a public speaker who intervened in hundreds of successful businesses and organizations such as Microsoft, Google, IBM, and many others. He has reached over 200 million people around the world with his practical methods, and his work has been translated into 47 languages. Yes, 47. So his work has appeared in well-known publications such as Newsweek, USA Today, as well as having made numerous appearances on the Oprah show, CNN, as well as other US talk shows to share his studies on the most practical and powerful methods for personal and spiritual growth, from mindfulness and depression to communication and personal transformation. Without further ado, listen up to this jam. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Melissa.
How are you?
I'm good.
So let's start with the basis. What is enlightenment, the awakened state?
You start with the easy questions. Okay. Well,
Of course.
I like
setting up the foundation.
Yeah. I've interviewed 100 spiritual teachers now, everybody from the late Mother Teresa to the Dalai Lama. And I often ask them that question. And I like the simple answer that a teacher named Adyashanti gave. And he said that enlightenment is basically just perceiving the world without the lens of an ego, that you're just like a presence that's just here. There's not a sense of you in the past or you in the future. And that's a very simple definition that I like. It's a shift in identity from our ego personality to either our soul or our awareness.
That's a beautiful answer. And what do you think it brings into someone's life, one awakened person versus one that is not yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wrote this book called The Enlightenment Project. And in the book, one of the chapters are the 25 myths about enlightenment. Because a lot of people think enlightenment, makes everything go great. You solve all your financial problems and relationship problems, but that's not the case. What it does do is it definitely brings a very deep sense of peace, and that's consistent. And there's actually different types of enlightenment. I talk about 4 different types, but all of them have peace in them. Some of them you can function really well in the world, and some of them you cannot function really well in the world. So it's not just one thing. And being able to scientifically study people who are enlightened, like me and some friends have, you get to see that, well, you can kind of tune it like a radio. If you want to be in the world, you want to make sure that you're in connection with your body. If you're in a cave in the Himalayas, that's not that important.
Yeah, and I think you answered partly my second question. Just like you said, you interviewed spiritual leaders around the world, Mother Teresa, Ram Dass, Byron Katie, and many others. And you also have been a recurring guest on the Oprah show. So from all of these interactions, how would you define what an awakened person is like? And what are the common myths about enlightenment? I mean, you already touched a little bit about that.
Yeah. One myth about enlightenment that a lot of people think is that it ends your problems, but it really doesn't. Life is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on, but people, since I've been able to interview all these people, I get to see that they do have certain common traits, and most of them are very kind. Most of them are very humble. Most of them are very giving, and most of them have a lot of peace. But as I said, there's different types of enlightenment. I'll give you a story from one of the people I interviewed, which was Oprah. Now, Oprah's not enlightened, but she does have many traits of somebody that is enlightened, such as she's very humble. I remember one time I was on her show, the first time, she asked about my dogs and asked how they were doing. And I said, well, one dog is not doing very well. And she asked, what's your dog's name? I said, his name's Rama. She said, I'll be sure to pray for him. Well, I'm on her show 2 years later, and she comes up to me and she says, how's Rama doing? And this was like a 10-second conversation from 2 years ago. So I didn't even know what she was referring to.
That
so
she would even remember, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I said, who's Rama? And she said, Rama's your dog. I was praying for him. How's he doing? And I was like, oh my God, but people who are awakened are different than most people in that they have so much more peace and so much more love coming through them that their lives end up being pretty different. And, they still have problems. They still have health issues. They still have all those money issues, but it is a great way of being. And the good news is that it's not as hard to become as awakened as we would like, as we thought it did with the right method. And as I started to study this, I started to be inspired that the technology or the ability to wake people up is increasing exponentially, in my opinion.
Just to circle back to what you said Oprah is not enlightened, but she has traits or qualities of an enlightened person. What do you mean by that?
Well, as you become more awake or enlightened, you do tend to become more humble, more kind, more loving, and more peaceful. Yet that's one view of it. Another view of it is that your identity shifts to just being awareness. And that has not happened for Oprah. But we use these terms enlightened like it's just one thing, but think of it more as a continuum. You and I are on a hero's journey of going from being identified with our ego to being identified with our soul or our awareness. And we're somewhere on that continuum. You probably have moments like watching a sunset or being with people you love where you're just totally present and totally in the moment.
Absolutely.
And enlightened people just have that all the time.
Okay. Because in your book, you use the word enlightenment and awareness interchangeably.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give us a little sentence about what the difference between both enlightenment and awareness, so we can have a better understanding of the book and everything around it?
Yeah. Being in a state of pure awareness where you're just like a presence here now without identification with your ego, that's one form of enlightenment. Okay. But there are other forms. It's like there's many different types of ice cream. They're all ice cream, but Rocky Road is different than strawberry. And another type of enlightenment is where you feel so much love going through you. You feel like you're God in human form in a certain way. That's different than being awareness. And there's another form of enlightenment where you are so present that it's actually hard to get stuff done in the world. So you want to be able to not only become more awake and enlightened, but to be able to tune it so that you can function in the world. And in the book, I talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So going back to your book, the Project Enlightenment, How I Went from Depressed to Blessed, and You Can Too, is not your first book around self-discovery and awakening, but your 14th. So 1/4. And you spend over 40 years interviewing incredible thought leaders around the world. So I'm intrigued about what brought you onto that path in the first place, and why writing a whole book about enlightenment, and especially why now?
Yeah.
So 3 questions in one.
Yeah. Well, what got me into this was I was blessed to have a very difficult childhood. So I kind of had my midlife crisis at age 12.
Wow.
You know, I realized this wasn't going to work. I became suicidally depressed. And then I started reading self-help books, started to get into hypnosis and meditation by age 14. And then I kind of made a hobby. I wanted to find out, could I heal myself with psychological and spiritual methods? And I just became obsessed with interviewing all the people whose books I read and wanted to see what worked. And something I learned, Melissa, is that I'm very lazy. If a method took over like 3 minutes a day to do, I found that I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
so I became focused.
Is important.
Yeah, I became focused on methods that took under 3 minutes a day to do, and kind of developed the hobby of looking for those methods and putting them out in my books. And because my books are very practical, Oprah liked them and they became popular. But in terms of enlightenment, I started to see that the happiest people were the people who were enlightened. And I wanted to be like them. I wanted to use their methods. I wanted to see if I could become more awake. And, you know, I'm a traumatized kid, but if you have the right methods, the right ideas, some amazing things can happen. And so in the Enlightenment Project book, I detailed the 20 or so methods and 30 or so ideas that seem to consistently lead people to greater peace, love, and joy.
And why now? Because you've been writing so many other books around self-discovery and awakening, but why this one now? Is it because of what we've been going through the last 2 or 3 years, or it was just like a natural evolution for you?
Well, it was a natural evolution. Of course, the world's in terrible shape and we could use all the enlightenment we can get.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's definitely true. But also, you know, in the last 10 years, it's only been the last 10 years that we've really studied enlightenment in a scientific way. And what researchers have learned is very different than what they thought. People used to think that it would take 50 years of meditating many hours a day to become enlightened. And they found that that was totally false. Yeah. People used to think that enlightenment would solve all your problems. They found that to be totally false. People thought that certain methods like yoga or Vipassana meditation, if you did enough, would lead to enlightenment. And they found that that was totally false. So what they found was that certain simple methods that were almost not known at all could actually trigger awakening experiences in most people in like 2 days.
Wow.
And when I read that, I was like, give me those methods. I want that. Do that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right on. So you are a public speaker, an author, obviously, as we've been talking about your books, but let's not forget that you're also a psychotherapist. So I'm very big on rewiring our thoughts through or harnessing our subconscious as much as possible. I've been talking about that through many of these podcast episodes. From your professional expertise, to reach enlightenment, what is the difference of impact between therapy or positive psychology and the techniques you mentioned in your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of psychology and psychotherapy is about healing childhood wounding and trauma and helping your ego to be a less neurotic ego. Enlightenment is more about how to be more present in this moment in a way that feels incredibly peaceful and loving. There's a definite overlap between the enlightenment methods and the psychology methods. I think of it like two wings of a plane. You know, a plane needs two strong wings to fly. If people just work on psychology, they tend not to be able to get off the ground very much.
Yes.
If people just work on enlightenment, they can often go around in circles because they haven't worked on their conditioning or their psychology. So I think it's really important that people do a little bit of both of those things. And with two strong wings, you can really soar.
Yeah, they complement each other in a way.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
And that's also what I do with this podcast, like offering a glimpse of different healing modalities from meditation, Ayurveda, etc. So the listeners can pick and choose what resonates with them and their lifestyle.
I think that's what we need to do. And I think that the methods for working on oneself have gotten better. You know, 100 years ago, Freud was, doing dream interpretation. Not that that's bad, but it doesn't lead to profound change. Yeah. And one of the things that got me into the enlightenment space was that some of the methods that have been invented in just the last 2 years are really mind-blowing. And I hope to share one or two of them today on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of great methods. One that I like, you can think of it as a 1-minute guided meditation. So if people can close their eyes just for a minute, they can try this. And that is, imagine that you have a big eraser in your hand and you can erase your feet from the material world. Just imagining it. And then erase your lower legs, erase your upper legs, erase your pelvis, your lower back, your stomach, and just move up your body. So you're kind of erasing it from the material world. And then you might feel that you're in your head. What would it be like to erase your jaw, your cheeks, your forehead, and then erase anything else so that your body is no longer here? And if that were the case, would you still exist? Something would exist, and that something would be your awareness, because you can't not be aware. Try to not be aware now. You can't do it. Now, what happens, though, is that our thoughts sometimes obscure this background awareness. So imagine that you could turn down the volume on your thoughts or erase your thoughts. And what would be left is just a pure, peaceful presence. And that's who we really are. And if you want, you can slowly open your eyes. Imagine that you were just born and you don't know what anything means. You see these sights, sounds, colors, but you don't have an interpretation of them. You're just a presence before the ego interprets things. And that can give you a little bit of taste of what it's like to just be enlightened, to be a presence that is not in the past, not in the future. It's just open, receptive, and here. Obviously, in the Enlightenment Project book, I have 30 different methods.
Yeah, you have a lot in there.
Right.
And that's funny because thank you for sharing that, first of all. It reminds me of something that I came across a few days ago. I think it was a talk or something. I can't even remember. The person who was interviewing was saying, imagine that your soul is just entering your body right now as you are. Let's say you're 30-year-old. So it arrives in your body as a 30-year-old self that you are, and you have no memories of your past. You have no motivation or ambitions that you have right now. So it's literally a clean slate. what would you do with your life right now as a brand new person, like living in the right here, right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in a way, it's only our ego that gets us involved in the story of the past and the future.
Yes.
So enlightened people often can make big changes in their life because they don't feel a connection to that character that did all these things in the past. I remember one time I actually had a concussion in which I forgot who I was, but I felt great. I was basically enlightened for a day because I had no memory of my past and I was just there and it was really fun.
That's an incredible experience to live, though, to not remember anything and just be brand new and having like the whole world as your oyster pretty much.
It was a lot of fun. I remember it very well. And part of my life has been trying to get back to that sense of freedom I had during that experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Moving on to what we all going through as a collective, I would say, with the rise of technology, capitalism, or consumerism, and the fast-paced society we live in, many of us kind of lost touch with our true self and our life purpose at some point. I made an episode about it earlier this year. Plus, with all of the atrocities, the state of the earth, and the current global economic situation, a lot of us are having a hard time. It is something that is corroborated by the drastic rise of depression in the last 50 years. Like a lot of us are much more depressed than ever before. Could you expand on that? Like how we losing touch with ourselves when we don't dissociate from the external?
Your problems that you just described are going to get worse too. The world is getting more stressful.
Yay.
So in that situation, you need simple ways to get back to a sense of peace, love, and gratitude.
Yeah.
And most people have only tried a couple of things. They may have tried one meditation method. They may have tried something. But, I find that if people try enough things, they find something that really works for them. So I'm going to share a story of a method that works for me. And what I like about this method is that it only takes 5 seconds. And yet it can totally transform how you are in the world, because mostly in the world, we're focused on problems and plans and how terrible things are. And that leads to depression.
Yes.
But the world has a lot of things you can focus on. When I interviewed all these teachers, one of the themes that came across a lot was the importance of focusing on gratitude and gratitude as a doorway to the divine. So I had a friend who went to India and he came back and he seemed like so happy and grateful. I said, what happened in India? And he said, well, my guru gave me a mantra that makes me feel overwhelming gratitude like all the time. And I said, really? Can you tell me what this is? And he said, no, you have to go and get it from the guru yourself. Have you ever been to India, Melissa?
No, not yet. It's on the list.
In the bucket list. It's hard to get to. And it's, so I travel 18,000 miles. I take a rickshaw for 5 hours. I wait in line to talk to his guru. Finally, I get a chance to ask him about his mantra. And he says in his Indian accent, yes, my mantra is the most powerful on earth. And he leans in to whisper. I'm very excited. And he says, whenever possible, repeat these words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you. I looked at him and I said, that's it? I traveled 18,000 miles to get thank you. That's it. He says, no, that's it is the mantra you have been using. That makes you feel like you never have enough. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere. So I'm pissed off and I look at him, I go, well, thanks for nothing. Yeah, and he looks at me and says, thanks for nothing is not the mantra. You must say it from your heart. So when you eat good food, say thank you. Or when you see your child or a sunset or a pet, say thank you from your heart. Well, it's interesting. I was totally pissed off and disappointed, but I traveled all that way. So I, got into a taxi and had air conditioning. In India, it's like 110 degrees. So I go, oh, thank you for the air conditioning. I get to my hotel site and there's a bottle of clean water. Thank you for this. And each time I'm feeling my heart just for a couple seconds and then saying thank you to the divine or thank you to the universe. And I open up my laptop. I'm Skyping with my wife for free on the other side of the planet. I mean, the technology we have now is amazing. I say, thank you for that. I see my wife. I'm thankful for her. Tears roll down my eyes. And she says, that must have been some mantra. I said, you have no idea. But, we are inundated with the story of the world and our problems and all the stuff. But if you think like, oh, my legs are working, thank you. I get to talk to you about a book I wrote. Thank you. It just goes on and on.
Sometimes it's the most simplest thing ever, but we always try to complicate things. And sometimes just the basic things that we need to be thankful for, like just as you said, like the fact that we're talking right now, the fact that we can walk and we can talk and we have a functioning brain. So thank you. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because I was about to ask you to share it, because I watched one of your talk that you gave at the Google headquarters a few years back, where you shared this story.
There's so many stories I got from these people that I interviewed that have touched me in special ways. One story that's kind of funny I share in the book is that many years ago, I used to have a spiritual movie night for about 30 friends. And we'd show these most profound movies. Well, one day I was going to be away, so I gave a movie to a friend to show to the group. And I thought it was the movie Gandhi, but it ends up in the sleeve. It was the movie Men in Black 2. Did you ever see Men in Black 2?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Men in Black 1 and 3 are pretty good. Men in Black 2 was
Not
blasted
so
by everybody. Yeah. Right. Anyways, but people had to write about what they learned from the movie, and everybody was used to seeing the profound message in these movies. So people wrote glowing reviews of how Men in Black 2 just changed their lives and gave them insights into the world. Well, what's funny is it's really our intention to learn, our intention to get something, insights or a technique that really make a difference. If you can get great insights, profundity from Men in Black 2, you can get it from your mate, from your kid, from whatever book you pick up. And that's something I learned. Sometimes the Dalai Lama would say the same thing that my wife said, but when he said it, I took it in. When my wife said it, I didn't.
Yeah, it's all a question of perspective, I guess, too.
Yeah.
I've been vocal about my own past struggles with high functioning depression and anxiety, and shared to some extent what worked for me. You have your own experience with depression and trigger warning, even suicidal attempt that you wrote about in your book. Can you share a bit about that, and what would you advise to someone who's currently in the midst of depression or going through chronic anxiety, but who wants to get better and transform their current reality?
I would say it's good to have what I call an experimental attitude. An experimental attitude is you try different things, and through your lived experience, you see what works for you. Because what used to work for me, certain psychological techniques, no longer are alive or work for me now because I'm in a different place.
Yeah.
Sometimes a person might need medication. Sometimes they might need a psychological technique. Sometimes they might need a spiritual technique like meditation or things like that. Yeah. So I encourage people to try stuff and see what works. The experts don't know you as much as you know you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is a lot of good stuff. I have a website called findinghappiness.com in which people can get my 10 favorite happiness hacks for free. But one of the things that's been shown to really help people with anxiety and depression is exercise and human connection. And at findinghappiness.com, there's actually I give people called the 12 questions of instant intimacy. And these are questions you can ask anyone and immediately connect. And in this COVID world, that sense of connection is really missing. So when you connect deeply with people through these questions, that helps a lot to overcome feelings of anxiety and depression.
Yeah, connection is the big thing too, definitely. Because most of the time is when we feel isolated or we isolate ourselves from others that we can get deeper into depression.
People don't necessarily know how to connect easily. And that's why these 12 questions of instant intimacy can be really useful.
Yeah, thank you for underlining that. That's very important too. But sometimes we see depression as this horrible thing. But when we think about Eckhart Tolle or Byron Katie, they did find awareness in their depression. And I believe I did too. Is actually what led me to this podcast and everything that I do around wellness and awareness. However, it's hard to see it as a blessing when we're in the midst of it, since we all navigate through our own journey differently.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what are the different types of depression and where does it come from a psychotherapy point of view?
Yeah. I think, Melissa, I have a podcast called Awareness Explorers, where we interview spiritual teachers, and my partner, Brian, suffered from severe depression. Now, one type of depression is just kind of like a chemical imbalance, and that's where medications can be helpful. But another type of depression is you feel like you're just not doing your life's work, or there's something wrong with, the world or what you're doing. And that's where finding a deeper sense of meaning, spirituality can be really useful. And then you could say there's another type of depression where you've been so traumatized by your past, which was true for me. My stepfather used to beat me up regularly, pretty badly. So that led to a lot of depression and helplessness. So you kind of have to realize there's different flavors of depression, and you might want to work on which flavor most speaks to you, which flavor it seems like is most impacting you. And people like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, they were kind of like, what's the meaning of life? And when they were able to find a spiritual method to deal with that, then they became awake very quickly.
Yeah. And even though there are different kind of depressions, some need medication, as you said, they're still all valid, because sometimes I feel like with everything regarding mental health, since it's invisible, a lot of people think that they're just having a bad day, or it's not as valid as people who actually followed through the medical system with medication.
Yeah. Helped a lot of people with depression. I do a lot of talks about that. And I think if you have this experimental attitude where you're trying a bunch of stuff, exercise or medication or meditation or other different things, that you kind of eventually find what works for you. A problem with depression, though, is it's hard to be motivated. Then develop motivation methods. I'll give you one of them, which I talk about in the Enlightenment Project book. And that is, I say, and I still do this because I'm lazy. I'll say I have to meditate half an hour a day, or I have to exercise 4 times a week. And if I don't do those things, I have to, at the end of the week, rip up $1. Now, I don't like ripping up money. I don't know about you.
Me neither.
So to avoid ripping up $1, I make sure I meditate every day. To avoid ripping up $1, I make sure I exercise and do other things that are good for me. And that keeps me out of the depression and into feeling good. And so every week I have a friend who keeps track of me, calls me up. Did you meditate? Did you exercise? And if I didn't do everything, I said, then I have to rip $1. But, I've only had to rip up about $2 in the last 2 years.
Oh, wow. That's a commitment.
Yeah.
It's important to be committed to your own self. I'm going to follow up with another question. To me, and I think to you too, consciousness is deep, vast, and infinite in a sense. When can we say that we are enlightened, if that's even possible? Like, having had so many enlightening experiences in your own life, but also hearing firsthand the ones of leaders whom we would consider enlightened. How do you think we can be completely enlightened at some point in our self-discovery or spiritual journey towards conscious living?
Well, normally what happens is that people have moments and more moments of enlightenment experiences where they're just fully present and egoless in that moment. Yeah. And then sometimes there's a tipping point where their identity just shifts. My identity is mostly in this character named Jonathan Robinson.
Our avatar.
Yes. There have been weeks in my life where actually my identity shifted, and Jonathan, if somebody referred to Jonathan, it struck me as funny because there was no Jonathan. And but I don't live in that state normally. Well, it'd be like if somebody called you Sarah, and you learned to answer to Sarah, but you didn't feel like Sarah. You feel like Melissa now.
Yeah.
Well, enlightened people don't necessarily feel like there's an ego there, that there's any kind of character there. They just feel like they just arrived on the scene. They don't like they were just born.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier.
Right, right. So think of it that there's a continuum from having enlightenment moments to all the way that you have no sense of ego whatsoever. There's a continuum, and we're all on that continuum somewhere. But I have seen that for many people, when they get the right method, that there's a sense of a tipping point in which they feel like they have become fully awake. Wow. And that's a beautiful experience for them.
Yeah. And you've been talking several times about the different methods. So let's get into that. Usually what we come across in the wellness community is leaders or trendsetters promoting their own method as the only one that brings true results, like the 5 a.m. morning routine, read 4 books a month or a week. I can remember money information only to attract wealth, and so many more that I don't even have the time to cite them all here. So just like so many industries in our society, it turns out to be a one size fits all. Even in our own personal self-realization journey, when we are all unique, undergoing vastly different life experiences and trauma. So the one size fits all, I think, is very strange, especially in this area. That's why I really appreciate your book, The Enlightenment Project, because you offer a myriad of different methods, techniques, and ideas without one being better than the other. So different people can see what fits to them and hopefully experience a glimpse or glimpses of higher states of awareness in their lives. And just like you've been saying throughout the whole conversation, you even encourage people to discover and experience or experiment even. I will just quote your book here. You say, instead of committing to a particular teacher or spiritual system, I tell people to continually expanding into new and deeper aspects of the spectrum of life. Having an experimental attitude means you act more like a scientist than a blind devotee. An experimental attitude can be a critical ingredient to help you explore things you would never want to commit to long term. So I think like that's very rare, especially in this field, that someone as knowledgeable as you is saying it's not this one thing. It's not meditation, it's not yoga, it's not whatever. It's just like go around and kind of shop around. So what pushed you to offer that many choices and accessibility when it would have been easier to just stick to the basics like yoga, meditation, or whatever, or just one method like the majority of thought leaders do?
Yeah, well, unlike some thought leaders, my mission was to really find the most effective methods, not to push one method. And there's now been some science that shows that certain methods are like 100 times more effective than others.
Yeah.
And only in the last few years have they been able to have enough population where they say, okay, let's have 1,000 people try this method. How many of them wake up? No one. Okay, let's try 1,000 people try this method. How many of them wake up? 300 of them. Oh my God, let's, like that. So I have made a personal mission to find which methods tend to be most effective. And then it's really a trial and error thing. Actually, I put a guided meditation of the 5 methods that have been shown to be most effective for the most people in one audio that's free. So if people want that, they can try out the 5 most scientifically validated methods. They may or may not work for you. And they can get that at the website, theenlightenmentproject.net. And it's a guided meditation that I just send out for free. And you start to see that, gee, the first method didn't work for me at all, but the second method made my head explode. That's amazing, And a lot of these methods didn't even exist 10 years ago. So most people are not aware of them.
Yeah. I will definitely link that in the show notes. And I'm also like from this school, like I love experimenting different things. Sometimes it will not work at all. Sometimes it will work wonderfully. But even though it works wonderfully, it will work wonderfully for a time. And then, I don't know, it may be like my own evolution or my own journey. This method doesn't serve me anymore. So I need to go and find another one. And it keeps on going like that.
I found that to be totally true as well, that, and that's true in our life. At one time, playing with dolls might have really made us incredibly happy. Well, it doesn't do anything for us now, that we're an adult. A method that might have worked last year might not be the one that gets you to the next stage.
Talking about going to the next stage, usually depression is about the story that you tell yourself. So what you resist persists, obviously. So when we get stuck in our story, usually we fall into depression, depending on if your story is a negative one. So I often feel bad about myself when I occasionally express bouts of depression remnants, when I've done all of this inner work for so long now. So, but I usually pick myself up when I see that the story that I tell myself, and that makes me feel bad, is actually full of lies. And I don't know if it's like the awakening or the awareness that I have now that makes me take a step back and listen thoroughly to the story that I tell myself. But it's funny that when we're in that state, we think that this story is the truth. So to you, from your personal experience with depression, your professional point of view, and from everything you wrote in your book on the subject, do you think we can be fully free from depression with awareness?
I think we can. There's quick ways, spiritual ways to get out of depression, such as questioning your story. Or one that I use is, could I let go of my story just for 20 seconds?
Yeah.
Could I just step out of it for 20 seconds? Or another way would be to always be able to go into the sensations, because there is no such thing as depression. Depression is our concept of certain sensations that we're feeling in this moment.
Yeah.
And as you get more and more into presence, the idea of depression, or even that there's a person being depressed, starts to fade in the background. So I think that there's a lot of different approaches. Sometimes people just need to actually change something in their life, like get out of a relationship. So there's all these different approaches, and you got to find what works for you at this point in your life.
Yeah. Recently, something that I did that I've never done before, and I was in that state like for a short period, it was listing out all of my fears and worries. And then looking at the list, I read them out loud and I was like, this is so stupid. Like, trying not to judge myself, but I wasn't even believing what I was reading. I was like, why am I even telling myself that? This is so not relevant. So, and then you realize that your fears or worries are just stories and you can just let go of them.
Yeah, an analogy I sometimes use, for people who are viewing your podcast, imagine that there's a big whiteboard with a black dot on it, or a big piece of paper with a black dot on it. And that black dot represents your mind focusing on problems. And what most people do in life, and here's my black dot on a white piece of paper. What most people do is they put their eyeball right on that black dot and they say, oh, it's so dark. It's this black as far as I can see. There's nothing but blackness here. In reality, that our problems, our emotions are really just a small dot on a white screen of awareness. And as you become more aware of that perspective, of that awareness, your problems seem very, very small in comparison.
Yeah, there's more light than darkness on the
Absolutely.
paper, at least.
Yeah, unless your eyeball is on the black dot.
Yeah, try to take a little bit of perspective and a step back, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've got to ask you, because it's not every day that we meet someone who's encountered and interacted with the big conscious minds of this earth.
Yeah.
So what was it like to meet the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa?
Well, I have a story with each of them. With the Dalai Lama, he's like a 5-year-old wondrous child. And it was very interesting because you're not used to seeing an adult be so childlike.
Yeah.
And I just loved him. He loves laughing. There was no sense that I'm the Dalai Lama and you're somebody else. It was like just playing together in the sandbox, but we were playing with ideas and methods. And I remember just laughing uproariously with him half the time. But one of the things I asked him, how do you help people over conflict? And he said, well, I have something I can give you that helps people with conflict. It's an ancient Tibetan talisman. And he goes into his pocket and he takes out a big red bozo nose, those big red noses, and he puts it on his nose. And he says, it's very hard to argue or be in conflict with somebody who's wearing one of these noses.
Yes, indeed. I agree with that.
With Mother Teresa, she was very humble. Sometimes the simplest words and humility have impact. So one of the things she said to me is, nobody can do great things, but everybody can do little things with great love.
Ooh,
and I thought that yeah, so anytime we do a little act of kindness or we do anything from love, we are with those saints. We're doing what they're doing. And you don't have to spend 40 years in a cave. You can just do a little act of kindness and you align with higher forces.
Yeah, once again, the simplest things instead of the big grand gesture, when we can just do little act of kindness here and there. Was it what you expected, if you had any expectation, or was it like the guru that you met in India with just the thank you mantra? Or maybe you didn't have any expectations before meeting them both?
Well, being around a lot of awake people, I saw that they were very different. It's not like there's just one awake personality. It's almost like their full uniqueness blossomed. But the fact that they were very kind and humble was common amongst them. And it was just inspiring to be around such people, whether you look on YouTube or podcasts like this one's or mine or books, that nowadays we need all the inspiration we can get. Definitely. And luckily, these people, these messages are out there if we search for them, and they fill you up.
Yeah, I love that. Last but not least, the question that I ask to every single guest: do you have simple daily habits you do to act more consciously in your life?
I do. And because I'm lazy, most of those habits are really easy.
That's good. Share them with us.
Well, one of the things that's a nice thing is each of these leaders that I interview, I ask them for their best 10-minute guided meditation.
Oh,
so on the website, awarenessexplorers.com, there are 90 guided meditations that are all about 10 minutes from people like Adyashanti and the Dalai Lama and Deepak Chopra and Byron Katie. And they're all free. And I listen to one of those guided meditations at least every day, sometimes 2 or 3 of them. And they're all different. They're all really fascinating and really good. So, that just involves pushing a button and then just sitting there, and you can be guided into a higher state of consciousness. That's one thing I do. Another thing I do is I do a little what's called darshan with a great spiritual being named Sophie, who is my golden retriever.
Okay, go on.
I love dogs. So every morning I kiss her nose. I tell her how much I love her, and she licks me and kind of tells me how much she loves me. And we do this for like 5 minutes because I love it. Anytime you can deepen into love with any being, whether it be a tree, your mate, or your dog, you're doing a good thing. So I do that. And then I do about 10 minutes of aerobic exercise every day, because if I don't, you know what I have to do? I have to rip up a dollar. Exactly.
Yeah, and we don't want that.
No, we don't. So those are 3 things that I tend to do every day.
They're great. And you also have another website, I think it's called From Sad to Glad. I don't know if you still use that or advertise that.
I do. And people can actually get a program for dealing with depression for free. Most of what I do now is free. The book's like $15. But I'm trying to really give people amazing amount of useful information, and preferably with little or no money, because the world's in a bad place. I have been lucky that I've sold a lot of books, and I feel like, when I'm of service, it feels really good.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. It's free. We're trying to share as much knowledge and wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, to help raise the collective awareness. So I'm glad that you offer so many options too. I will definitely link everything in the show notes.
Yeah.
Jonathan, I still have so many questions for you. I could talk for hours, but we have to wrap it up. So that's it for now.
Can I end with a story? A brief story?
Of course.
So there was one guru I met in India that when I got to his ashram, he's a very famous guy named Punjaji. When I got there, he told me to sit in front of him, kind of like face to face, like you and I are. And he got real close to me. He said, "Who are you?" And the first thing that occurred to me was to say, "I'm Jonathan Robinson from the United States." And then he laughed hysterically. So I thought that was the wrong answer. So he said, "No, who are you really?" And I said, "Well, I'm a spiritual seeker." And he just kind of shook his head, no. I said, "Well, I'm a man." And he said, no. And I said, "I'm an author." No. We did this for about 2 minutes. I just basically ran out of roles that I play. And I looked in the eye, and there was like light coming out of his eyes. So I just got quiet and looked him in the eye. And then there was like a feeling of a wave of love that hit me like a tsunami. And it was so powerful that I ended up like just spontaneously crying and sobbing in his lap. I'd never really felt so much love and peace. And I don't know if he sent me some energy or what went on, but I'm like sobbing in his lap. And as that is going on, he taps me on the head and he says, "This love and this peace that you feel now, that's who you are. And your job is to never forget that."
Wow, that's beautiful. Was it like as if he was seeing you for who you really are and not necessarily any of the archetypes that you portray? That I think brought out all of this emotion within you.
I think what happened is he like sent me some energy that just kind of cleared my slate of all the stuff I've gotten lost into. Yeah. So I could feel the purity of the deepest part of ourselves, which is love and peace. And to know that that's really what we're here to do, to get back to that place as best as we can.
Yeah.
That's our job.
I second that. I'm very grateful and appreciative for your time, for having shared your knowledge and wisdom with us today, and for writing this book, The Enlightenment Project, How I Went from Depressed to Blessed, and You Can Too, which I'm sure will greatly help so many people going through their own shadows. Where can we get our hands on your book and find you and listen to your podcast?
Well, of course, the book you can get Amazon, or you can download the first couple chapters for free at theenlightenmentproject.net. The podcasts you can get on any podcast app or at awarenessexplorers.com, in which case there's all these meditations that are free there as well.
Thank you so much.
It was a great pleasure, Melissa.
Thank you to have taken the time to listen to me and my guests talking about conscious living. Conscious Matters is a self-produced podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, leave a review, and/or donate. Your support will help to keep on raising the collective consciousness together. Take care and talk to you soon.